Maya Rodriguez was 5 years old when she first fell in love with the smell of motor oil and the sound of engines coming back to life. While other kids her age were watching cartoons, she was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor of her father's auto repair shop, handing him wrenches and soaking up everything he taught her. Carlos Rodriguez had opened his small garage 20 years ago with nothing but a toolbox, big dreams, and hands that seemed to understand what engines needed before they even broke down.
He never planned on his youngest daughter becoming his best student.
But life has a funny way of surprising people. "Maya, bring me the socket wrench," Carlos would call out from under the hood of some beat-up sedan. Before he could even finish the sentence, the right tool would appear in his greasy palm. She had memorized every tool in his collection by the time she was 7. The other kids in her neighborhood thought she was weird. While they played house or video games, Maya was learning why cars made different sounds when something was wrong. She could tell you the difference between a problem with the alternator and issues with the starter just by listening. Her friends didn't understand why she got excited about fixing things, but Maya didn't care. She had found her calling early in life. By age 12, Maya could change oil, replace brake pads, and diagnose most common engine problems better than mechanics twice her age. Her father never pushed her toward this path, but he couldn't ignore her natural talent. Every summer vacation was spent in the garage, and every weekend meant learning something new about how machines worked. "You have the gift, mija," Carlos told her one evening as they cleaned up after a long day of repairs. "But having talent isn't enough. You have to be willing to prove yourself every single day. People will doubt you because you're different from what they expect." Maya didn't fully understand what he meant back then. She just knew that engines made sense to her in a way that math homework never did. When she held a wrench, it felt like an extension of her own hand. When she listened to an engine run, she could hear its stories and problems like other people heard music. High school was tough for Maya. While her classmates worried about prom dates and college applications, she was spending her afternoons rebuilding transmissions and learning about diesel engines. Her guidance counselor kept suggesting she consider nursing or teaching, anything that seemed more suitable for a young woman. Maya smiled politely and ignored the advice. Her father taught her about all kinds of vehicles. They worked on motorcycles, pickup trucks, delivery vans, and even the occasional boat engine. But Maya's real passion was for the big machines, the heavy-duty engines that powered construction equipment and industrial machinery. These weren't just transportation. They were the workhorses that built the world around them. The summer before her senior year, Maya convinced her father to let her work on a broken bulldozer that a construction company had towed to their shop. Most small garages wouldn't touch equipment like that, but Carlos trusted his daughter's instincts. She spent 3 weeks studying that machine, taking apart its massive engine piece by piece. When she finally figured out the problem, a tiny crack in a fuel line that was causing pressure issues throughout the entire system, Maya felt like she had solved the world's biggest puzzle. The construction foreman was amazed that a teenage girl had fixed what 2 of his regular mechanics couldn't figure out. That success planted a seed in Maya's mind. She started dreaming bigger than her father's small garage. She wanted to work on the really challenging stuff, the massive industrial engines that other mechanics feared to touch. After graduation, Maya spent a gap year working full-time with her father and taking community college courses in advanced automotive technology. She learned about computer diagnostics, hybrid systems, and the latest engine technologies. But her heart still belonged to the big, complicated mechanical problems that required both brute strength and delicate precision. The opportunity came when Henderson Heavy Machinery posted a job opening for an apprentice mechanic. This wasn't just any repair shop. They handled the biggest, most expensive equipment in the county. Mining trucks, industrial generators, massive excavators, and construction equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maya had heard stories about Henderson from other mechanics. It was where the best of the best worked, where they handled repairs that could make or break entire construction projects. The pay was excellent, the learning opportunities were endless, and the reputation would open doors anywhere in the country. She spent weeks preparing her application. Her resume might not have looked like the others. She was 19 years old with no formal apprenticeship experience, but her practical knowledge was deeper than most. Mechanics who had been working for years. Carlos helped her practice for the interview, asking her technical questions and watching her work through complex problems. "Remember," he told her, "let your work speak for itself. Show them what you can do. Don't just tell them. The day Maya walked into Henderson Heavy Machinery for her interview, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she had never experienced before. The building was enormous, filled with equipment that dwarfed anything she had worked on in her father's garage. Massive engines hung from chain hoists and the air hummed with the sound of serious repair work. She was interviewed by 3 senior mechanics who seemed skeptical from the moment she walked in. They asked her technical questions that she answered confidently, but she could sense their doubt. When they asked about her experience with heavy equipment, Maya described the bulldozer repair and several other large projects she had tackled. "We'll call you," they said at the end of the interview, but their tone suggested she shouldn't hold her breath. 3 days later, Maya's phone rang. They were offering her the apprentice position, but she could hear the hesitation in the supervisor's voice. "We're taking a chance on you," he said. "Don't make us regret it." Maya accepted immediately. This was her shot at the big leagues, her chance to prove that skill mattered more than expectations. She had no idea that her new workplace would challenge everything she believed about herself, or that she would soon face the biggest test of her abilities in front of people who had already decided she didn't belong there. On her last night working in her father's garage, Carlos gave her a small toolbox that had belonged to her grandfather. "These tools have fixed thousands of problems," he said. "Now they're yours. Remember, Maya, engines don't care who fixes them. They only care if you understand what they need." As Maya prepared for her first day at Henderson Heavy Machinery, she carried her grandfather's tools and her father's wisdom. She had no way of knowing that both would be put to the ultimate test sooner than she could imagine. Maya's first day at Henderson Heavy Machinery started before sunrise. She arrived 30 minutes early, clutching her grandfather's toolbox and wearing her cleanest work clothes. The parking lot was already half full of pickup trucks and motorcycles. These weren't the kind of mechanics who rolled in whenever they felt like it. The building looked even more impressive in the morning light. Through the massive bay doors, Maya could see equipment that cost more than most people's houses. Industrial excavators, mining trucks with tires taller than she was, and generators the size of small buildings filled the workspace. Jack Morrison, the floor foreman, barely glanced at Maya when she introduced herself. He was a big man in his 50s with arms like tree trunks and a voice that carried across the entire shop floor. Everyone clearly respected him, or at least feared disappointing him. "So you're the new apprentice," Jack said, looking her up and down with obvious doubt. "Hope you're stronger than you look." "We don't have time for anyone who can't pull their weight around here." Maya nodded politely and waited for her assignment. She had expected some skepticism, but the coldness in Jack's voice caught her off guard. This wasn't just professional doubt about a new employee. This felt personal. The other mechanics introduced themselves with varying degrees of warmth. Most seemed decent enough, though she could feel them sizing her up. Tom Walker, a senior mechanic in his 40s, was the only one who seemed genuinely welcoming. He had kind eyes and grease-stained hands that spoke of decades of honest work. "Don't mind Jack," Tom whispered as the foreman walked away. "He's old school. Thinks this work requires more muscle than brains. You'll have to prove yourself, but that's true for anyone new around here." Maya's first assignment was basic maintenance on a fleet of construction vehicles. Oil changes, filter replacements, and routine inspections. Not exactly challenging work, but she attacked it with the same focus she brought to complex repairs. She noticed things that others missed, small problems that could become big headaches if ignored. On her second day, Maya spotted a hydraulic leak on an excavator that 3 other mechanics had signed off on as ready for service. The leak was tiny, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look, but it would have caused major problems within a week of heavy use. When she pointed it out to Jack, he seemed annoyed rather than impressed. "Anyone can find problems," he grumbled. "The question is whether you can fix them without making things worse." By day 3, Maya could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. Some of the mechanics were starting to warm up to her, impressed by her attention to detail and willingness to take on the dirtiest jobs without complaint. But Jack remained skeptical, assigning her only the most basic tasks while the real challenges went to the experienced crew. That's when the Caterpillar excavator came in. The machine belonged to Riverside Construction, one of Henderson's biggest clients. The company had been losing thousands of dollars every day the excavator sat broken, and their patience was running thin. 3 different mechanics had already spent days trying to diagnose the problem. But the massive engine continued to run poorly, producing irregular power and making strange noises that no one could identify. Maya watched from a distance as the senior mechanics worked on the machine. They had torn into the engine with systematic thoroughness, checking fuel systems, testing compression, and replacing parts that seemed even slightly suspicious. But after each attempt, the engine still ran rough and unpredictable. "This thing is cursed," muttered Danny, one of the younger mechanics, as he emerged from the engine compartment covered in grease. "Nothing we're doing is making any difference." Jack was getting frustrated. Maya could see the tension in his shoulders and the way he kept checking his watch. Riverside Construction had already called twice that morning, and their patience was wearing thin. A job like this could make or break Henderson's reputation with one of their most important clients. "Let me take a fresh look at it," suggested Tom, rolling up his sleeves. Sometimes you need new eyes on a problem. As Tom dove into the diagnostics, Maya found herself drawn to the machine, despite having no official reason to be near it. She couldn't help herself. Complex problems called to her like puzzles begging to be solved. While the others focused on the engine's internal components, Maya started listening to the sounds it made and feeling for vibrations that others might miss. There was something about the engine's rhythm that reminded her of a problem she had encountered before. Not exactly the same, but similar enough to trigger her memory. She found herself studying the machine from different angles, trying to understand what it was trying to tell her. That's when Jack noticed her. "What are you doing over here?" His voice carried across the shop floor, drawing everyone's attention. "This is way beyond your skill level, apprentice. Why don't you go sweep the floor or something useful?" Maya felt her face flush red, but she kept her voice steady. "I was just observing, trying to learn from watching the diagnosis process." Jack walked over to where she stood, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. The other mechanics paused in their work, sensing the tension building. Maya could feel their eyes on her as Jack positioned himself between her and the excavator. "Let me make something clear," Jack said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't your daddy's little garage where you can play with lawnmowers and pickup trucks. This is a professional operation dealing with equipment worth more than you'll make in 10 years. The shop had gone completely quiet now. Even the sound of air tools had stopped as everyone watched the confrontation unfold. "These machines require real expertise," Jack continued, gesturing toward the massive excavator. "One mistake can cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars and destroy our reputation. I'm not about to let some kid with delusions of grandeur anywhere near our most important repair jobs." Maya felt something burning in her chest, not just embarrassment, but a deep frustration that had been building since her first day. She thought about her father's words, about letting her work speak for itself, but how could she prove anything if she wasn't given the chance? "I understand the responsibility," Maya said quietly, but her words carried clearly in the silent shop. "I've been working on engines since I was 5 years old. I know I'm new here, but I'm not new to this work." Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. 5 years old? Playing with toy cars doesn't count as experience, sweetheart. Why don't you go make some coffee while the real mechanics figure this out? Maybe you can learn something by watching from a distance." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She had faced skepticism before, but never such open dismissal. Around the shop, some mechanics looked uncomfortable with Jack's tone, but none spoke up. The hierarchy was clear, and challenging the foreman wasn't something apprentices did if they wanted to keep their jobs. Maya stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. She could walk away, accept her place at the bottom of the ladder and hope that eventually her skills would be recognized. Or she could find another way to prove that Jack Morrison was making a big mistake by judging her based on assumptions instead of abilities. The massive excavator engine continued its irregular rhythm, still calling out with problems that 3 experienced mechanics couldn't solve. Maya knew she had ideas worth exploring, solutions that might work where others had failed, but getting the chance to prove it would require more than just skill. It would take an opportunity that seemed impossible to create. As Maya finally walked away from the excavator, she made a promise to herself. Somehow, some way, she would show Jack Morrison and everyone else in that shop exactly what she was capable of. The only question was how long she would have to wait for that chance. The next morning, Maya arrived at Henderson Heavy Machinery to find the atmosphere even more tense than usual. The Caterpillar excavator still sat in the center bay, surrounded by scattered tools and frustrated mechanics. Overnight, the problem had gotten worse. Now the engine wouldn't even start reliably. Jack Morrison stood near the machine with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice getting louder with each passing minute. Maya could catch pieces of his conversation with someone from Riverside Construction, and none of it sounded good. "I understand your concerns, but we need more time," Jack was saying, pacing back and forth. "This is a complex issue. Yes, I know what it's costing you. No, we haven't considered bringing in outside specialists yet." When he hung up, Jack slammed his hand against the excavator's frame. "They're giving us until Friday," he announced to the shop. "If this machine isn't running by then, they're taking their business elsewhere and telling every construction company in the county that we can't handle the tough jobs." Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. Henderson Heavy Machinery's reputation was on the line, and with it her job and the jobs of everyone around her. She watched as Tom Walker and two other senior mechanics huddled around the engine, their faces grim with concentration. "We've checked everything twice," Tom was saying to Jack. "Fuel system, electrical, compression, timing. Everything tests normal, but the engine runs like it's fighting itself." Danny wiped his hands on a rag and shook his head. "It's like the problem moves around. Fix one symptom, and another one pops up somewhere else." Maya continued her assigned work on the smaller machines, but her mind kept drifting to the excavator. During her lunch break, she found herself studying it from across the shop floor. There was something about the way the engine vibrated during the brief moments when they got it running that nagged at her memory. She thought about similar problems she had encountered in her father's garage. Most of them had been on much smaller engines, but the principles were the same. Sometimes the most obvious symptoms weren't caused by obvious problems. Sometimes you had to look beyond what everyone expected to find. As the afternoon wore on, the mood in the shop grew darker. Tom had called in a favor from a specialist at another facility, but even the outside expert seemed stumped after spending 2 hours with the machine. "I've never seen anything like this," the specialist told Jack before leaving. "The engine is mechanically sound, but something is causing harmonic interference throughout the entire system. You might need to tear it down completely and rebuild it from scratch." Jack's face went pale. A complete rebuild would take weeks and cost more than Henderson could afford to absorb. Word was already spreading through the local mechanical community that one of their most experienced teams couldn't solve a basic engine problem. That's when Tom Walker did something unexpected. Maya was organizing tools in a supply cabinet when she heard Tom's voice carry across the shop floor. "Jack, we need to try something different." "What do you mean?" Jack asked, frustration clear in his voice. Tom gestured toward Maya, who was pretending not to listen while continuing her work. "Let her take a look at it." The shop went quiet. Maya felt every pair of eyes turned toward her, and her hands froze on the wrench she was holding. Jack stared at Tom like he had lost his mind. "Are you serious? She's been here 4 days. 4 days, Tom. She's never even worked on anything bigger than a pickup truck." "That's not true," Tom replied calmly. "I called her father yesterday. Carlos Rodriguez has a reputation in this business that goes back decades. Maya fixed a bulldozer engine last summer that had 2 certified mechanics stumped for weeks." Maya slowly turned around, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected anyone to check on her background and certainly hadn't expected Tom to go to bat for her like this. "Besides," Tom continued, "we're out of options. The worst thing that happens is we're exactly where we are now. Stuck. But maybe fresh eyes will see something we're missing." Jack looked around the shop at his other mechanics. Some nodded slightly while others seemed skeptical but didn't object. The weight of the situation was pressing down on everyone. "This is ridiculous," Jack muttered, but Maya could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "We can't let an apprentice work on a $250,000 machine just because we're frustrated." "She won't be working on it alone," Tom said. "I'll supervise every step. If she sees something worth exploring, we'll evaluate it together. If not, we haven't lost anything but time we're already wasting." Maya found her voice. "I don't need to touch anything," she said, stepping closer to the group. "Just let me listen to it run and look at what you've already checked. Sometimes a different perspective can help." Jack checked his watch and looked at the excavator with the expression of someone running out of choices. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, he sighed heavily. 5 minutes, he said, holding up his hand. 5 minutes to look around and tell us if you see something we missed. Then we get back to real solutions." Maya nodded and walked toward the excavator, trying to ignore the fact that everyone in the shop had stopped what they were doing to watch her. Her grandfather's toolbox suddenly felt heavier than usual as she set it down beside the massive machine. The first thing she did was exactly what she had told Jack. She listened. Tom started the engine and Maya closed her eyes, focusing on the sounds and vibrations. There was a pattern there, something rhythmic but irregular that didn't match what she would expect from the problems everyone had been chasing. "What are you hearing?" Tom asked quietly. "It's not just irregular," Maya said, opening her eyes. "There's a pattern to the irregularity, like something is throwing the timing off at specific intervals." She walked around the machine, placing her hands on different parts of the frame to feel how the vibrations traveled through the structure. The other mechanics watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism as she continued her examination. Maya pulled out a small flashlight and began looking at components that had already been checked multiple times. But she wasn't looking for the same things the others had been looking for. She was thinking about the vibration pattern and what could cause that specific type of harmonic interference. "Show me what you've checked so far," she asked Tom. For the next few minutes, Tom walked her through everything they had tested and replaced. Maya listened carefully, asking specific questions about timing measurements and vibration patterns at different RPMs. As she absorbed the information, a possibility began forming in her mind. It was something her father had taught her about harmonic resonance in large engines, a problem so subtle that most mechanics would never think to look for it. "Can you start it again?" Maya asked. Jack looked at his watch pointedly but nodded to Tom. As the engine fired up, Maya positioned herself near a specific section of the engine compartment that the others hadn't paid much attention to. She watched carefully as the engine ran, focusing on a component that wasn't typically associated with the symptoms everyone had been chasing. After 30 seconds, she asked Tom to shut it down. The shop was completely silent now. Maya could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her as she formulated her next words carefully. "I think I know what's wrong," she said quietly. Jack crossed his arms and gave her a look that clearly said this better be good. "5 minutes are up. What did you find that 3 experienced mechanics and an outside specialist missed?" Maya took a deep breath, knowing that the next few words would either vindicate Tom's faith in her or confirm Jack's belief that she didn't belong there. "It's not any of the systems you've been checking," she said. "The problem is with something much more subtle, but it's creating problems throughout the entire engine." The moment of truth had arrived. Maya looked around the shop at the faces staring back at her. Every mechanic had stopped working to watch this moment unfold. She could feel the weight of their skepticism, but also something else, a hint of hope that maybe, just maybe, she might have the answer they all needed. "The harmonic balancer," Maya said, pointing to a component near the front of the engine that most of the mechanics had barely glanced at during their diagnosis. Jack's eyebrows shot up. "The harmonic balancer? That's your big discovery? We're dealing with power irregularities and timing issues, not vibration problems." "That's just it," Maya replied, her confidence growing as she explained her theory. "The harmonic balancer isn't just about reducing vibration. When it's even slightly out of position, it creates a cascade effect that throws off the timing throughout the entire engine system." Tom walked closer, intrigued despite himself. "Go on." Maya pointed to specific areas of the engine as she spoke. "You've been chasing symptoms instead of the cause. The irregular power output, the strange noises, even the starting problems. They're all connected to harmonic interference that's making the engine fight against itself." Danny crossed his arms. "That doesn't make sense. We would have noticed if the harmonic balancer was obviously damaged or loose." "It's not obviously damaged," Maya said. "That's why everyone missed it. It's probably shifted just a few millimeters from its proper position. Not enough to see with a casual inspection, but enough to create problems that get worse as the engine tries to compensate." Jack looked at his watch again, clearly losing patience. "This is ridiculous. The harmonic balancer is one of the most stable components in the entire engine. They don't just mysteriously shift position. They do if there was impact damage that nobody noticed," Maya responded. "Has this excavator been in any accidents lately? Even something minor like backing into a wall or dropping the bucket too hard?" Tom's expression changed suddenly. "Actually, yes. Riverside mentioned that one of their operators caught the edge of a concrete foundation with the bucket about 2 weeks ago. Jerked the whole machine pretty hard, but there was no obvious damage." Maya nodded. That kind of sudden impact, can shift the harmonic balancer just enough to cause exactly these symptoms. The engine still runs, but it's constantly fighting against harmonic interference that affects everything else. The shop had gone completely quiet. Even Jack seemed to be considering her explanation, though his expression remained skeptical. "Assuming you're right," Jack said slowly, "which I'm not saying you are, how do you propose to fix it? The harmonic balancer isn't exactly easy to access on this engine." Maya had already thought about that. "We don't need to remove it completely. If I'm right about the shift, we can realign it without a full teardown. It'll take some careful work, but it's definitely doable." Tom looked at Jack. "What do we have to lose? If she's wrong, we're exactly where we started. If she's right." Jack stared at the excavator for a long moment, then at Maya, then back at the machine. The silence stretched on until Maya could hear her own heartbeat. "Fine," Jack said finally, "but I'm watching every move you make. One mistake and you're done here. Not just with this repair. Done at Henderson permanently." Maya nodded, understanding the stakes. This wasn't just about fixing an engine anymore. This was about proving that she belonged in this world, that her skills were real, and that Jack Morrison had been wrong to dismiss her. She opened her grandfather's toolbox and selected the tools she would need. The harmonic balancer was positioned behind several other components, making access difficult but not impossible. She would have to work carefully and methodically. "Tom, can you help me remove these cover panels?" Maya asked. "I need better access to check the alignment." As they worked together to expose the harmonic balancer, Maya explained what she was looking for. "If I'm right, we'll see that it's shifted slightly from its mounting position. The shift might be so small that you'd miss it, unless you knew exactly what to look for." Other mechanics began gathering around the machine, curious despite themselves. Even Danny set aside his skepticism and moved closer to watch. Maya used a precision measuring tool to check the balancer's position against the engine's specifications. After several careful measurements, she looked up with a mixture of excitement and vindication. "There," she said, pointing to the readings on her gauge. "It's off by about 4 millimeters. That doesn't sound like much, but at the speeds this engine operates, it's enough to create harmonic interference throughout the entire system." Tom checked her measurements and whistled softly. "She's right. Look at this positioning compared to the spec sheet." Even Jack leaned in to look at the readings. Maya could see the surprise in his eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been respect. "Okay," Jack said grudgingly. "So you found the problem. Can you actually fix it?" Maya was already positioning her tools. "The tricky part is realigning it without removing the entire assembly. I need to loosen the mounting bolts carefully and shift it back to the correct position." The next 20 minutes were the most intense of Maya's young career. Every movement had to be precise, every adjustment carefully measured. She worked with the kind of focused concentration that blocked out everything else around her. Tom assisted by holding components steady, while Maya made the alignment adjustments. The other mechanics watched in silence, some clearly hoping she would succeed, others still waiting for her to prove Jack's doubts were justified. "Almost there," Maya murmured, making a final micro-adjustment. "Tom, can you check the alignment one more time?" Tom used his own measuring tools to verify Maya's work. "Dead on spec," he announced. "Perfect alignment." Maya carefully tightened the mounting bolts to the proper torque specification, double-checking each one to make sure the balancer stayed in its corrected position. When she was satisfied with the mechanical work, she stepped back and wiped her hands on a rag. "It's ready to test," she said quietly. The shop fell completely silent. This was the moment of truth. Either Maya's diagnosis was correct and the excavator would run perfectly, or she was wrong and her time at Henderson Heavy Machinery was over. Jack walked to the operator's seat and reached for the starter. Maya held her breath as he turned the key. The massive engine turned over once, twice, and then roared to life with a sound completely different from what they had been hearing for days. Instead of the rough, irregular rhythm that had plagued the machine, the engine now ran with the smooth, powerful consistency of a perfectly tuned piece of heavy equipment. Jack let it run for 30 seconds, then increased the RPMs. The engine responded instantly, smoothly, without hesitation or irregularity. He worked the hydraulics, and they functioned with the precision that Caterpillar equipment was famous for. The silence in the shop was deafening. After 2 full minutes of perfect operation, Jack shut down the engine. The sudden quiet seemed to echo through the building as everyone absorbed what they had just witnessed. Maya had done the impossible. She had solved a problem that 3 experienced mechanics and an outside specialist couldn't figure out. More than that, she had done it with a solution so elegant and precise that it seemed almost simple in retrospect. Jack sat in the operator's seat for a moment, staring at the controls. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed completely. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something Maya had never expected to see from him. "How did you know to look there?" he asked, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it. Maya smiled, thinking of her father and all the lessons he had taught her about listening to engines and thinking beyond the obvious. "Symptoms. My father always told me that engines talk to you if you know how to listen," she said. "Sometimes the biggest problems have the smallest causes. The silence that followed the engine's perfect performance seemed to last forever." Maya could hear her own heartbeat as she waited for someone, anyone, to break the tension that filled the shop. It was Danny who spoke first. "That was incredible," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like that. How did you even think to check there?" Tom was grinning from ear to ear as he walked around the excavator, listening to the engine's smooth idle. 23 years I've been doing this work and I learned something new today. Maya, that was brilliant problem solving." Other mechanics began gathering around, asking questions about the diagnosis and wanting to understand the solution. Maya found herself explaining the harmonic balancer issue to a group of experienced professionals who were genuinely interested in learning from her. But Jack Morrison remained silent, still sitting in the operator's seat of the excavator. Maya could see him processing what had just happened, and she wondered what was going through his mind. Finally, Jack climbed down from the machine and walked directly toward Maya. The shop went quiet again as everyone watched this encounter unfold. "Maya," Jack said, stopping directly in front of her. For a moment she thought he might still find some way to dismiss what she had accomplished. Instead, Jack extended his hand to her. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the shop floor. "I was wrong about you. Dead wrong." Maya shook his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of decades of honest work. "Thank you," she said simply. "No," Jack continued, "thank you. You just saved this company's reputation with one of our most important clients. More than that, you showed me that I've been making assumptions that have no business in this workplace." He turned to address the entire shop. "Everyone here learned something today. Not just about harmonic balancers, but about recognizing talent wherever it comes from. Maya earned her place here with skill and knowledge, not luck." Word of Maya's success spread quickly through the local construction community. By the end of the week, Riverside Construction had specifically requested that Maya be involved in any future repairs to their equipment. Other companies began asking Henderson Heavy Machinery if the young woman who had solved the impossible excavator problem could take a look at their challenging mechanical issues. Maya's phone started ringing with job offers from competitors who had heard about her diagnostic abilities. But she chose to stay at Henderson, where Tom Walker took her under his wing as his official mentee. And even Jack Morrison began treating her as a valued team member rather than a burden to tolerate. 3 months later, Maya was assigned to lead her first major repair project. A mining company had a massive haul truck with an engine problem that their regular mechanics couldn't solve. The truck cost over $1 million and was losing them tremendous amounts of money every day it sat idle. Maya approached the problem with the same methodical thinking that had served her well with the excavator. She listened to the engine, felt for unusual vibrations, and thought beyond the obvious symptoms to consider what might be causing the cascade of problems. This time, the issue was with the electronic control system that managed fuel delivery to the massive diesel engine. A tiny sensor, no bigger than Maya's thumb, had been damaged and was sending incorrect signals that confused the entire engine management system. Previous mechanics had focused on the mechanical components while overlooking the electronic brain that controlled everything. When Maya's solution fixed the problem completely, the mining company's operations manager was so impressed that he offered her a job on the spot, with a salary almost double what Henderson was paying her. Again, Maya chose to stay loyal to the company that had given her a chance, but she negotiated for a significant raise and a new title, Senior Diagnostic Specialist. By her second year at Henderson, Maya had developed a reputation as the mechanic who could solve problems that stumped everyone else. Companies throughout the region began requesting her specifically for their most challenging repairs. She specialized in what others considered impossible cases. engines that ran poorly for mysterious reasons, equipment that failed in ways that didn't match any normal patterns, and complex systems where multiple problems created confusing symptoms. Maya's success led Henderson Heavy Machinery to create an entirely new service division focused on complex diagnostic work. They advertised Maya's expertise and found that clients were willing to pay premium rates for her specialized knowledge. Jack Morrison, who had once dismissed her as a kid playing with toy cars, became one of Maya's strongest supporters. He referred difficult cases to her and often told visitors about the day a 19-year-old apprentice had taught him the most important lesson of his career. I almost let my prejudices cost this company one of the best mechanics I've ever worked with. Jack would tell anyone who would listen. Maya didn't just fix that excavator. She fixed my thinking about what makes a good mechanic. Tom Walker often joked that Maya had become a better diagnostic specialist than he was, but he was genuinely proud of her success. She sees things the rest of us miss, he would say. It's not just knowledge, it's intuition combined with the willingness to think differently. As Maya's reputation grew, she began receiving invitations to speak at industry conferences about advanced diagnostic techniques. She traveled to other cities to consult on particularly challenging repairs that local mechanics couldn't solve. 3 years after her first day at Henderson, Maya made a decision that surprised everyone. She announced that she was leaving to start her own specialized diagnostic consulting service. "I'll always be grateful to Henderson for giving me my start," Maya explained to the gathered staff, "but I want to focus completely on the kind of complex problem-solving that I love most." Jack Morrison shook her hand at the farewell gathering, his eyes showing genuine emotion. "You're going to be incredibly successful," he told her. "And you're going to help a lot of people who are facing problems they can't solve on their own." Maya's consulting business grew rapidly. She worked with companies across multiple states, flying in to diagnose problems that had local mechanics stumped. Her reputation for solving impossible mechanical issues made her one of the most sought-after specialists in the heavy equipment industry. She never forgot the lessons her father had taught her about listening to engines and thinking beyond obvious symptoms. But she also never forgot the lesson she had learned from Jack Morrison about the importance of giving people chances based on their abilities rather than assumptions about who they were. 5 years after that confrontation at Henderson Heavy Machinery, Maya was invited back to speak to a new group of apprentices starting their careers. She stood in the same shop where Jack had once told her to go make coffee while the real mechanics worked. "The most important thing I can tell you," Maya said to the young faces looking up at her, "is that engines don't care who fixes them. They only care that you understand what they need and have the skills to help them." In the audience, Jack Morrison nodded approvingly. The young woman he had once dismissed as a kid playing with toy cars had become exactly what he always claimed to value most, a mechanic whose work spoke for itself. Maya's story became legendary in the heavy equipment repair community, not just as an example of exceptional diagnostic skill, but as a reminder that the most valuable discoveries often come from the most unexpected sources. She had proven that wisdom and expertise could come in forms that didn't match traditional expectations, and that the willingness to listen to engines and to people could lead to solutions that seemed impossible until someone made them real.